Well, this week I did something for the very first time. On Wednesday, I had my very first colonoscopy. As many of you know, I turned 50 and they recommended you get a colonoscopy, so I did, and I'm happy to report that everything is clear, everything looks good. So I don't have to do it again until I'm 60. Now, if you've been through the procedure, you know that the procedure itself that day is very easy breezy. It's over before you know it. But it's the day before that is the difficult day. Now, they say that fasting is a really powerful spiritual practice, but I have to say that I was not a happy camper on Tuesday, having to fast from solid food for 24 hours. And I really felt that day those hunger pangs. And at times they were really intense and very painful. And when I did, it made me very mindful every time those pangs hit that my fasting was just temporary, but that there were millions of people around the world who every day experience those hunger pangs. It is a way of life for them. And it also got me thinking, in light of today's gospel, that there are also countless other people around the world who are also suffering hunger pangs, but not from physical hunger, but because they are spiritually hungry. And those pangs, that intense pain, is also very real. Those people who are spiritually hungry are in our midst. Maybe even you are. Maybe you feel like right now in your life, you are spiritually malnourished. Jesus in today's gospel said there is a bread that you can eat and you'll never be hungry again. So we're going to talk about today about where that bread is and how we get it. This is the second week in a row that we're hearing about bread. If you remember, if you were here last Sunday, Jesus fed 5,000 people with 2 fish and 5 loaves of bread. And he leaves right after he does that because it said he knew that they wanted to make him a king. He didn't want that. So he left. He went on a boat to the other side. But you'll see in today's gospel, the people followed him there. And Jesus said, you came looking for me not because you saw God in my actions, but because I fed your stomachs and for free. And he tells them, don't strive for such perishable food, but work for food that is going to last forever. Jesus is reminding them, and he's reminding us, that we are not mere physical beings, that we are spiritual beings. And many of us have forgotten that. Many of us believe that we're physical beings, and from time to time in our lives we'll have spiritual experiences. But the truth of the matter is it's just the opposite of that. We are eternal spiritual beings, and the physical is just temporary. But the spirit is eternal, and we should be feeding that. So many of us are feeding the physical. So I know many people who spend hours going to the gym. And I know other people who they eat so purely, only organic foods. But those same people are filling themselves with mental junk food. They're filling themselves with fear and worry and anxiety and lack and limitation and not feeling worthy. That's not healthy. No matter how we physically feed ourselves, buying ourselves things, having nice houses, that the physical, that's temporary. Jesus is saying we need to feed the Spirit. And when we do that, we will not be hungry anymore. So that is the lesson that he's trying to teach them in today's gospel, and you kind of get the sense that they're not really getting it. And so we hear again about the manna from heaven. John read it for us so nicely in the first reading today from Exodus, and it's mentioned again in the gospel that Moses fed the people with manna from heaven. The bread comes from heaven. So where is heaven? Is it just going to fall out of the sky? Well, I've told you this before. If you look back in the New Testament, Jesus never described heaven as a place up in the sky. He never described heaven as a place outside of us that happens after we die. Jesus' words, if you look back, every time he talks about heaven, he says, the Spirit of heaven is at hand, which means it's now. And he said, the kingdom of heaven is within you. That bread from heaven, where's heaven? It's in you. That's where the bread is. We're looking for it outside of ourselves. So when our spirits feel malnourished, we say, I'm going to go shopping. That'll feed me. I'm going to go out drinking. I'm going to go travel. I'm going to meet somebody new. That's going to feed me. And Jesus is saying, nothing outside of you is going to really feed you. It's what's within. That's where the bread is. That's why in the words of integration, Joyce Rupp says that unless we are rooted in personal prayer practice, we will never be spiritually nourished. And it's why I hear people all the time say to me, Pastor Sal, I don't know, how am I supposed to know God's purpose for my life? What's God's plan for my life? How do I know where God's guiding me? And I say, what is your prayer practice? And they say, what? I say, well, tell me about your meditation practice. Tell me about your prayer practice. Oh, well, I don't really have one, but... So, and that's what's happened to us. How can we know? How can we feed on that bread if we don't get still and go within? Because that's where the bread is. It's inside of us. It's not outside of us. So we have to be still and know that. Now we at Douglas UCC, every single Sunday, we celebrate communion, the bread, the breaking of the bread. And the word communion means union with. It's union with God. That's what we are doing here symbolically every Sunday. Is we're saying God is our nourishment, our sustenance, our bread. And we're remembering that when we ingest that it is within us and we're united with God. Jesus was Jewish, and we know that our Jewish brothers and sisters use bread. It's that beautiful challah bread. If you've ever seen it, it's that braided bread. And that's the reason why it's braided. It's saying we are united with God. We are braided together. And they talk about the leaven. The leaven is the yeast. It is that activating agent that makes the bread rise. When we are united with God, braided together, then we experience that life to the full. And what Jesus is trying to say to the people is stop focusing on the food that is only going to feed you temporarily, and feed yourself on the food that's going to last forever, which is union with God. Our Hindu brothers and sisters practice yoga, and that is what the word yoga means. It means union with God. It means being yoked with God. That's what we mean about praying without ceasing, that you hear about in the scriptures. It says we should pray without ceasing. So many of us think, oh, that means that throughout the day we have to keep saying these rote prayers over and over. That's not what it's saying. It's saying that throughout your day, you want to remember your connection with God. That's what Joyce Rupp was getting at this morning in her words of integration. She was saying that we kind of fragment our spiritual life from the rest of our life. To pray without ceasing means everything reminds us of our connection with Spirit. There's a spiritual classic book which is called Practicing the Presence of God. And it was written by a 17th century monk who was only known as Brother Lawrence. And Brother Lawrence in that book said, no matter what I'm doing, whether I'm washing dishes or peeling potatoes, I am remembering my connection with God. That's what we mean by feeding from that daily bread. It's remembering that we're not separate from the bread of life, that the bread of life is within us. Now, the following 2 Sundays, the gospel reading is also about bread. So, today what I'd like to focus on is the I am part of Jesus' statement, I am the bread of life. Now, in John's Gospel, which we're reading from this month, Jesus performs 7 miracles, and he gives 7 I am statements. I've explained to you in recent weeks that 7 is a very powerful spiritual number. It signifies spiritual perfection or completion. So in John's Gospel, Jesus says 7 I am statements. I am the gate. I am the vine. I am the bread. I am the resurrection. I am the light. Many Christians believe that Jesus, when he's saying I am, is referring to himself. But Jesus, for him, it was never about himself. That's why he ran away. That's why he went on in the boat to the other side, because he said they wanted to make him king. They wanted to make it about him. For Jesus, it was never about him. It was always about us. So yes, was he the Son of God? Yes, but what did he say? He said, you are the sons and daughters of God. And was he the light of the world? Yes, of course, but he said, you are the light of the world. Jesus kept putting it on us. It's not about him. So when he says, I am the bread, I am the way, he doesn't mean I, Jesus. And this is a very important spiritual lesson for all of us. There's the I, which is the small self, the physical self. That's the I. But then there's the I am. And the I am is the divine self, the God self, the spiritual self. Jesus is saying we need to braid together the I with the I am. Do you remember when Moses asked God, what's your name? And God said, I am who I am. That's God, the I am. When you unite the I with the I am, that's the way. That's the bread of life. Our Hindu brothers and sisters, when they practice union with God, when they practice yoga, they chant Om. If you look in the Hindu scriptures, Om is spelled A-U-M. It's the I am. That's the vibration. That's God at work in us and in the world. That's what it means to feed from the bread of life. Is to be still. Remember what Jesus said? Be still and know what? I am. Be still and know that I am. You can only know it in the stillness, which is why if you want to be united with God, you want to hear God's voice, you want to know God's plan for your life, you want to know God's purpose for your life, you're not going to find it in a book. You're not going to find it from talking to Pastor Sal. You've got to get still each and every day and have some type of personal prayer practice that works for you. That's how we feed from the bread of life.